Hello everybody, welcome to Dackman Productions. Welcome to Conahay Rail. So for this video, I have a little predicament here. But this needs a little backstory before we begin with the predicament. So, I decided about a month ago, if you guys already know, that me and Walter Herbine of the Train Shop Weekly, we go back and forth about Conrail versus Reading constantly. You know, he doesn't like Conrail because Conrail took over Reading, and I'm pro Conrail because they took over bankrupt railroads, including Reading. Yes, they were bankrupt as well, whether he wants to admit it or not. And turned them into a profitable railroad and basically saved railroads and the supply chain on the east coast of the United States. So you can find plenty of posts and videos about us going back and forth about the Conrail versus Reading. So my plan was, I was looking for a Reading locomotive shell, a diesel locomotive. And I was looking, and I couldn't find anybody. You know, I see plenty of locomotive shells for sale, but nobody was selling a Reading one. And you know, shells go from anywhere from $50 all the way up to, I see them as high as $80. Sometimes somebody goes a little overboard and asks, you know, like $100 for a diesel locomotive shell. But anyway, I wanted a diesel locomotive shell because I wanted to create a locomotive scrap scene featuring one of my Conrail cranes. And I could just picture it in my head. Okay, here's the locomotive. There's a couple workers cutting it apart. The crane has maybe a door. And it's on its hook, lifting it off to put in a scrap pile. You know, there's already a few pieces of the locomotive in this scrap pile, along with a few other pieces of scrap from previous Reading locomotives that were scrapped. Something along the lines of that. And I already had a place laid out for it, but I was having a tough time. So I reached out to a couple people that I know that sell trains on the side, and I reached out to the one person. He goes, I think I got what you're looking for. I'm like, cool. He got back to me. He says, I have a Lionel TMCC Reading locomotive GP35. He says it's complete. I'm like, okay, but what are you asking for it? And because I only had a certain budget, and he told me the price. I'm like, so that's for the entire locomotive? He goes, yeah, that's everything. And the problem with it is he couldn't quite remember, but he did say he remembers that the rear trucks were taken apart for some reason or another, but he couldn't remember why. I said, okay, well, I don't care. I'm using it for a scrap scene anyway. And I'll tell you guys how much I paid for this thing at the end of the video. So if you want to know how much I paid, you're going to have to watch this all the way to the end. So I received this locomotive. I unboxed it, unpackaged it. Now remember, I bought this thing, in my mind, dirt cheap. And I was expecting a locomotive, not in a box, nicked up, chipped up, dusty, dirty, manhandled, you know, worn paint. To my shock, I open up the package and it's in a box. And it's an original packing. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. Alright, well, I open it up and it's like, that's crazy. This locomotive looks great. This thing looked almost brand new. You would swear up and down that this locomotive was brand new. But upon closer inspection, you can tell that it was definitely played with and used, and somebody really well enjoyed it. It's sort of like going to a buy here, pay here car lot, right? And the guy in the office decided he's going to buff up and super shine this car that looks great from the outside on the body, but it's got 325,000 miles on it. That'd be about a fair comparison. But I'm like, you know what? Yeah, it's got wear on the running gears, it's got wear on the wheels, it's got wear on the rollers, but the thing looks great. So I'm like, you know what? I said, whoever had this obviously took care of it. So I made an assessment. I seen that I took the body off, and I definitely seen that the motor was taken apart off the truck for some reason. So I went ahead and put it on my traditional track because I did not want to short anything out on this track, definitely. So if it was going to short, I wanted to short and blow up over there. Because nothing over on my MPC air layout could get hurt by a short and a board failing or whatever have you, what was going to happen. But it ended up working. And the motor, I could see the motor starting to spin. And of course, it was popping up and down because it wasn't fast. And I'm like, well, the motor's spinning. I think I'll find a couple screws for this thing. I wasn't sure what kind of screws this thing took. And so I did the next best thing is I reached out to a place called B&D Train Shop. They are highly recommended by the New York Electric Trains. Jeff, who's one of the co-owners of New York Electric Trains, he would always say, look, if you want this serviced, if you want this repaired, if you want this freshened up, we highly recommend B&D Train Shop. So I sent B&D Train Shop a message. I said, hey, look, I took pictures of the locomotive and the item number, and I said, hey, I'm looking for these screws that hold this motor down. And I sent pictures of what I was talking about. And he said, I'll get right back to you. And he did. It didn't take him long. And he said, Sean, I don't have the screws, but here's the sizes. He actually told me the size of the screw that I needed. So I was really impressed. Usually repair shops don't tell you, hey, you can do this, or you need this part, you can find it here. But he went out of his way to look up what screws this locomotive took, looked in his inventory, didn't have them, and said, Sean, these are the screws you need. You can just buy them on your own. And that was great. That's a great service. I was impressed. So I bought the screws that he recommended, and they were perfect. They were the correct screws. So, for those who want to know, for the TMCC, the screws that hold the motors in case you lose yours are 2.5 millimeter by 10 millimeter. That's what he told me that they were, and they were the ones that fit. And they tightened right down. I was able to put the motor in. I'm like, okay, I'm set. Let's see what we can do. So I made a test run without the body on my MPC layout again, because if this thing was going to short out, I wanted to short out on my traditional layout so nothing gets damaged on my high rail layout. So I made this run. Check it out. Alright, let's do what happens. Wow, that's a loud bell. Huh. Got my finger in the way. So I was like, wow, this thing runs really, really good. I was impressed. It didn't skip a beat, has diesel sounds. So now I wanted to know if it would take basically a program and work off of my 990 remote. I wanted to see if it would work off of cab 2. So when I was assembling this motor, I made sure that, because you got to take the motor block apart to do this, I made sure I lubed and greased everything while I was right there. So once I got the locomotive up and running, I decided, okay, it's time to put the body on, and we'll go ahead and give it a shot on the the high rail layout. So we're going to go ahead and put this locomotive on the high rail layout, and we're going to check it out.
You are cleared for departure.
And as you guys could hear in the video, it had one heck of a noise coming from the rear motor area. I'm like, okay, so that's why the motor was taken out. This thing's got a noise. And so I turned the volume down, and I listened to it pass by. And being a diesel mechanic, I learned to use my ears for a lot of diagnostics over the years. And I've been able to determine if something's got a bad cam, a bad lifter, a rod bearing that spun. I'm pretty good at that, you know. And if you don't believe me, you can ask a lot of people that work with me over the years. They said, yeah, Sean's got pretty good hearing. He can determine what that noise is. But going back to that locomotive, as it passed by, I'm like, I know exactly what that noise is. It's the flywheel on top of the motor. It's rubbing something. So I went ahead and took it back apart again for the second time. And I did find rub marks into the stamped steel. I don't know if it's a shield, a heat shield, or a protection shield, or what that shield is for. But as you can see in this picture here, there is definitely rub marks. But not only did I see rub marks into that shield, but I found some fresh green paint on the side of the flywheel. Now I'm calling the top piece on the top of the motor that spins a flywheel. Uh, those out there can correct me if I'm wrong and naming that part the flywheel, but that's what I think it's called on this part of the motor. Brain rate. So I bent the shield out of the way, but as far as the flywheel, um, getting green paint on it, only one of two things can be going on here. First scenario is that the body had slightly warped inward, and now the motor is rubbing. But I noticed that the noise mainly happens while the locomotive is in a curve or some kind of curve. Because a couple of my curves I have them banked or what's known as super elevated a little bit. And so the second scenario I'm thinking is there's probably a little bit of wear to where that motor is tilting enough inside, just enough to rub the side of the body. And there's not a lot of room in the back of that locomotive as it is, not like there is up front, because the locomotive actually is bigger out front, and then of course it's much more narrower in the rear of it. So what I'm seeing inside, there really wasn't a lot of leeway room if something was to be worn. So my assumption is probably since I did bend that heat shield or that shield away from the motor and put it back together again, and it still rubs a little bit. So at this point in time, I'm going to say that there's probably wear, and eventually that motor, is going to eat out enough of the body to, quiet down later on. I don't know how much longer that would take, or if it would actually go through. I think the body's too thick. I don't think it would actually go through all the way. But the reason why the front motor probably has the same amount of wear, but the body is so much wider there, it's not going to rub on anything. And it's, even rubbing on the flywheel, it's really not hurting anything on the rear motor. It doesn't seem to affect its performance. Doesn't seem to slow down or jerk or anything. It's just got that irritating rubbing noise. And so after that assessment, I decided, you know what? I'm not sure what I want to do with this locomotive, because the locomotive, besides the noise, runs perfect. It's a perfect running locomotive. It runs strong. It pulls the train with no problem. And the one thing I can say, and I've said this before about TMCC's steam locomotives that I heard in person, the horn sounds absolutely amazing. The horn blows away any horn that I have on any of my legacy locomotives. I could not believe how great the horn sounds on this. I'm like, why is this horn sound not on my legacy units? I mean, the bell, okay, it's like kind of clanky, but the horn, they really nailed it. And I've always said that the sounds on a lot of the Lionel TMCC steam has a lot better bass to them than a lot of the legacy versions. And you can say that's my opinion, but in my mind, I'm saying that's a fact. And there's been plenty of people I've talked to who agreed with me. Yeah, with TMCC, you don't get all the bells and the whistles. You get a basic cab chatter. At that point in time, the cab chatter was just undistinguishable language. It was like, gibberish. This is plain gibberish because they weren't advanced then. And then the only other cab chatter was the announcement, you're ready to depart, or something like that. And so I was just, amazed that everything worked. It took a program. I programmed it to locomotive number 55. And I watched this thing. I don't know. I was entertained for, even with the little noise that's got to it, for at least a half hour. I watched this thing run and run and run and run and run. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to pass this locomotive off like it's this some like new model. I mean, yeah, the body is like brand new. And like I mentioned, going to a buy here, pay here, you got a bright, shiny, highly polished body, but the car really has 325,000 miles on it. So this thing does have some use to it, but it's a strong runner. It does pull. It doesn't hesitate. It's not, I don't know. So at this point in time, I'm asking you guys, what do you think I should do? You know, I'm thinking right now, I don't want to, I think it's, so before you answer that question, let me tell you how much I paid for it. So if you go on eBay, bodies are generally, just a shell, are generally from $50 to $80. What would you say if I told you that I only paid $125 for this? That's right, $125. Came with a box. Came with a fresh set of traction tires. And it is item, in case you want to know, number 6-28216. This model was made in 2002, so that shows you how old it is. So she's quite old. Probably older than a lot of people have been in the hobby. But it was a brand new Lionel locomotive mold at that time period. They just introduced the GP30. It was a new release mold for that. So it shows you how old the mold is for the GP30, since it was first introduced in 2002 under Lionel. But now I'm thinking, all right, what do I want to do here? Because I don't want to destroy a locomotive that's running, but yeah, I wanted to make the scrap scene. So I'm sort of like torn because, yeah, it looks good, but it still has plenty of wear to it. So I'm thinking at this point in time that I'm not going to sell it because it is well used, and I don't think it should go to anybody that would want to run it on continually and expect it to last and hold up. And I don't want somebody to be disappointed. So I'm going to keep a hold of it at any rate, and I'll just keep using it as is until it finally gives up, maybe until the motor or the flywheel finally maybe goes through the shell. I don't think that will happen. But what are your guys' thoughts? Do you think I'm making the right decision by not making a scrap scene? I mean, let's face it, TMCC boards, they don't go for much money. You can buy them I think Train Z has them brand new, listed for like $50, $80. I think there's a motherboard they have listed for $80 or $50. They have the soundboard for $50, and then they got the control board for another $50. So there are TMCC parts on there, and they're all brand new. So there's no real call for that I've seen for TMCC boards. So, what are you guys thinking? You thinking that I should just go ahead and make my scrap scene, my dream Conrail scrap scene where there's a Reading locomotive getting torn apart for the scrapyard, or should I just enjoy it and then run it until it quits? And the other thing is, being as how it's a Reading locomotive, a lot of people are going to cringe. If you guys remember right, I made a Conroe Patch Reading boxcar. And yeah, it's pretty crude. I got a couple of, I guess you could say, criticisms where somebody said, "Oh, it looks like you just took a paint marker and or magic marker and crossed it out with a black magic marker." You think Conroe did anything different back in the day? No. They did some quick patching on their own, including painting locomotives with a mop and a bucket of blue paint. And that's absolutely true. And you can fact check me on that, because that actually really happened. A lot of the Lehigh Valley switcher locomotives were painted with a mop and a bucket of blue paint. So they were very crude back then. But at any rate, I like to hear from you guys. I want to know what you guys think, or what your thoughts are. Eventually, I would like to do a scrap scene one day. So I guess I'll hold on to this, wait and see if it dies anytime soon. And yeah, some Reading locomotives were scrapped before they got the Conroe patch, because they were in such bad shape, and some of them did make it into Conroe patching and then scrapped. None of the GP35s ever made it into blue paint before they got scrapped. Most of them stayed in, all of them actually stayed in their patch paint scheme. They were all scrapped before they made it into blue paint. However, I think a few of the 30s, GP30s that is, did make it into blue paint. So we're going to go ahead and give this a full run, let you guys look at it, enjoy it, watch it. Yes, there will be a noise in the back end. You already know what it is. I told you what it is. It's the flywheel rubbing the body. So expect it to have a little noise to it. But at any rate, let's go ahead and enjoy this.
You are cleared for departure.
say that's got the most realistic locomotive diesel wind down sound that I've heard in a long time. The wind down of the diesel locomotive as I'm slowing down is a lot more realistic in this TMCC version than it is in my Legacy. Now, many of my all my Legacy locomotives, you guys see me run. You don't see me behind the scenes, but I'll let you guys know now that when I'm using my 990 remote, really actually when I throttle up the locomotive, I have to throttle up the sound to go along with it a lot of times. It doesn't seem that the motion actually is perfect with the speed of the locomotive. But as you see, this one is. As I'm taking off and the locomotive is feeling a load, okay, the motor winds higher and higher and higher, which is pretty much realistic. In order for me to accomplish the same thing with my Legacy locomotives, what you guys aren't realizing is when I take off, I'm actually hitting the throttle up button on my Legacy locomotives to basically do the same thing. Now, I could actuate the train brake and accomplish the same thing, but I don't have to with this one, is what I'm saying. So that's the other thing that I like. I believe that the horn and the throttle up and throttle down is more realistic to the speed of the locomotive. So that's my take on this locomotive at this point in time. Now, Walt's argument would be is, he thinks that the colors are off on the Reading locomotive, that Lionel can't get the yellow correct. He also mentions the fact that Reading locomotives don't have sun visors on them. I told him, well, that's easy to remedy. You can just take them off. Just break them off or cut them off. But as far as the yellow paint, I don't know. I can't tell you if it's correct or not. But I can tell you that this runs really well. Okay, guys. Thanks for watching another Diagnosing Productions video. We'll catch you at the next train show, the next train event. We'll catch you trackside. Goodbye.